Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. Zhou Hong looked askance at Xu Peng. Considering what he knew about Xu Peng's personality, he knew that it wouldn't be possible to change his mind. Unfortunately, Gong Sunyi had refused his invitation with a sarcastically worded message explaining that he didn't need to resort to plots and schemes to earn back the face he had lost, that he would do so with his own battle prowess. Although Zhou Hong wasn't too pleased about that, afterward, he had been left with no other option than to meet with Xu Peng. After all, he had certain misgivings about the junior champion king, and didn't want to get involved with him. Don't worry, brother Xu, this Bai Hao has already reached a dead end. I know we can't kill him, so my plan is to simply humiliate him and make sure he won't stick around in Arch-Emperor City. We just need to drive him back to Giant Ghost City. That really was what Zhou Hong wanted. Having this Bai Hao stuck in Giant Ghost City, out of sight and out of mind, was much different from having him right in Arch-Emperor City, making a big scene. Besides, the former would give him the chance to achieve even greater success eventually. Right now, the political climate in Arch-Emperor City was very unstable, so if Bai Hao managed to consolidate his power, it could make him very difficult to deal with later. Oh, Xu Peng said with a smile. I'd love to hear the details. With that, he looked over expectantly. Well, Zhou Hong replied, I haven't thought through all of the specifics yet, but we can't just let him do whatever he wishes around here. His shop is getting really popular, right? My plan is to call over one of the top Grandmaster Necromancers from 9 Serenities City and set up a shop right next to Bai Hao's. When it comes to battle prowess and fighting, Bai Hao is definitely incredible. But I refuse to believe that he's just as good at doing business. If we cut off his source of income, he'll get desperate enough to start making mistakes, and then we'll have the advantage. The truth was that Zhou Hong had already worked out a complicated plan, but didn't want to reveal that fact to Xu Peng. He was actually still disgruntled that he couldn't just attack Bai Hao and deal with him directly. Unfortunately, he couldn't beat him in a fight, and therefore had to resort to schemes to get his revenge. Xu Peng listened attentively, and in the end, gave an enigmatic smile. He was no fool, and knew that Zhou Hong must have other plans that he wasn't revealing. However, Xu Peng still wanted to try to take advantage of the situation for his own benefit, and in any case, there couldn't be any harm in opening a shop. In fact, it might even help out the situation. Finally, Xu Peng nodded. That sounds like a good idea, brother Zhou. In fact, how about I invite a Grandmaster Necromancer from Spirit Advent City? We can both open shops, right in Burrow 89. The two of them laughed heartily, and then went about making the arrangements. Half a month later, Bai Xiaochun was still in the middle of researching the formula for 17-colored flame. Bai Hao was finished with his improvements to the techniques, but still needed to work out some of the particulars. Business kept getting better, and there never ceased to be a line going out the door. It was also during that half a month that the two shops on either side of Bai Xiaochun's changed ownership. After closing briefly for renovations, they both reopened, larger and more luxurious than ever before. In terms of the specific businesses involved, they sold soul medicine and offered spirit enhancement services. Most shocking of all were the names attached to the signs above the shops. One was Sima Dao, the other was Sun Yifan. When those two names were revealed, it caused a big stir in Burrow 89. It only took a short period of time before people were talking, not only about Bai Xiaochun's shop, but about these two newly opened shops. Sima Dao, he's a Grand Elder from the Sima clan in Spirit Advent City. And he's also a Celestial Necromancer. He's adept at spirit enhancements, and is widely accepted as the #1 spirit enhancer in Spirit Advent City. He's so famous. Everybody says that he's one of the few necromancers who might actually break through into the earthly rank. Sun Yifan is no ordinary individual either. He's a rogue cultivator without a clan, but who earned the favor of the 9 Serenities King. After that, he achieved a meteoric rise to his current rank of Celestial Necromancer. You know what I heard? Supposedly, he was so grateful to the 9 Serenities King that he agreed to become his High Counselor. In terms of his skill in necromancy, it's on par with Sima Dao's. The entire city was shaken by these two names, and despite the incident which had occurred with Chen Shang, many people began to pay much closer attention to see what would happen. After all, Burrow 89 wasn't in Arch-Emperor City's central district, it was located more toward the fringes of the city. For two Grandmasters to suddenly set up shop in a place like that was very telling. They're making a move on Bai Hao, one from 9 Serenities City and one from Spirit Advent City. They're challenging him without making any open moves. I smell a plot. Bai Xiaochun was angered by this new development, which immediately cast him in a bad light. Despite the fact that he could perform a 15-fold spirit enhancement, in terms of both cultivation base and reputation as a spirit enhancer, he could only be considered someone of the junior generation to these two. Almost immediately, business began to shift to the shops operated by the two grandmasters. The sole medicine being sold there was high grade, and every portion was marked with an official seal guaranteeing its level of quality, which also made the medicine something of a collectible. As far as spirit enhancements went, both necromancers had enhanced multiple magical items to the point of a 15-fold enhancements. In fact, Sun Yifan's masterwork was a magical device he had enhanced 16 times for the 9 Serenities King. Bai Xiaochun was stuck right between those two other shops, and it only took 3 days for his business to take a critical hit. Bai Xiaochun was not happy at all. Upon walking out to inspect the two other shops, he found that they were indeed larger than his. When you added in how their work was guaranteed by means of a seal, it really made his own shop seem too simplistic. What's the meaning of this? Can't beat me in a fight, so now they're going to try to put me out of business. Both of the other two shops were completely bustling, and although his shop wasn't completely empty, it was nothing like it was before. 9 Serenities City, that must be Zhou Hong. And Spirit Advent City, I didn't take any life force from Shushan. Why would she have it out for me? Quite a few people noticed that Bai Xiaochun had walked out onto the street to look at the other shops. Even Sima Dao and Sun Yifan noticed, but seemed to view him as little more than business competition, and didn't pay him much heed. As far as they were concerned, Bai Xiaochun might have impressive battle prowess, and even have a nascent soul cultivation base, but in terms of spirit enhancement and necromancy, he couldn't compare to them. They had spent the majority of their lives immersed in necromancy, and had vast amounts of experience. There was no way that some up-and-coming brat could even come close to their abilities. After sizing up the situation, Bai Xiaochun stalked angrily back into his shop. Although he hadn't originally cared too much about this spirit enhancement shop of his, considering that his future cultivation was tied to multicolored flame, and he needed to do a lot of research, it meant that he had a greater need for vengeful souls than ever. In fact, the number involved was difficult to even process mentally. He couldn't go back to Giant Ghost City, and there was no way to shake down any clans. Mistress Red Dust wouldn't be of any help at all. That meant that the only other possible way to get souls was to beat people in fights, which was far too dangerous as far as Bai Xiaochun was concerned. Without souls, he couldn't conjure flame, and without multicolored flame, he couldn't increase his cultivation base. Without a higher cultivation base, he would never be able to get out of the wildlands. That, coupled with all the pressure from Mistress Red Dust, had him feeling very anxious. He was alone, with no clan to back him up, and without any stipend of souls from the Giant Ghost King. If he wanted to conjure flame and improve his cultivation base, then he had to rely on vengeful souls. His hope had come to rest in his shop, and he had originally assumed it would be able to support him to the point where he could increase his cultivation base and leave the wildlands. But now that these two new shops had opened up, Bai Xiaochun's plan was completely wrecked. Besides, if things kept going on the way they were, the other chosen in the city would surely get involved. If things got to the point where he had no business at all, then he would be in very serious trouble, and might even get killed. No, I have to think of a way. Back in his shop, he sat there thinking, a frown on his face as all sorts of ideas ran through his head. However, no matter what ideas he came up with, they had flaws that he couldn't deal with, considering how weak he was overall. Off to the side, Bai Hao looked at his master, and then at the people outside going mostly to the other two shops. After a moment, he said, "Master, I have 2 plans that can resolve the situation." "Huh?" Bai Xiaochun said, a bit taken aback. 2 plans? In the short time he had been together with Bai Hao, he had already come to see that he was extremely talented, so much so that he qualified to shake all of the wildlands. Without Bai Hao, Bai Xiaochun would have faced nearly insurmountable difficulties when it came to flame conjuring. However, it wasn't just Bai Hao's skill in flame conjuring that was impressive. Although Bai Xiaochun definitely had something to do with the success of the shop, much of it had to do with how Bai Hao handled everyday business. Overall, Bai Xiaochun was very pleased by the arrangement. However, he had noticed a weakness in his apprentice. Bai Hao always thought of things in a very limited way. He simply didn't match up to Bai Xiaochun, who thought grand thoughts and carried out dashing plans. Looking very serious, Bai Hao lowered his voice and said, "Master, these 2 plans of mine are currently in the early stages of planning. If you want more details, I'll need to put a bit more thought into them and work everything out." Or I can come up with some other ideas. Bai Xiaochun waved his hand dismissively and said, "No, that's fine, tell me your ideas." Then he looked at his apprentice with eager anticipation. Looking thoughtful, Bai Hao continued. "Master, Sun Yifan from 9 Serenities City and Sima Dao from Spirit Advent City are both celestial necromancers. One of them is a high counselor to a king, and the other comes from an aristocratic necromancer clan. On the surface, it seems like they're cooperating, but the truth is, as Grandmaster necromancers, they're both very arrogant. There's no way that they truly get along." The truth was that Bai Hao really had put a lot of thought into the situation, and was not just shooting his mouth, he was providing a fairly accurate analysis. Because of that, it doesn't really matter who is behind the scenes organizing all this. All we have to do is make it so that these two Grandmasters stop following orders, which should be possible as long as they aren't acting directly on behalf of their respective kings. You see, both of them view their reputation as being all-important. Although they are currently holding back, the two of them definitely are interested in outdoing the other. We just need to throw some fuel on the fire, and the two of them will start squabbling with each other. Bai Hao's eyes glittered, and his tone grew more sinister. "Master, all you have to do is make that happen, then suck it up a bit and get on the good side of one of them by acknowledging him as superior. Not only would that improve your own reputation, you also could use it as an attack on the other. In terms of all the complicated things that need to happen behind the scenes, I can handle that. By following this plan, it will only take a short period of time to achieve the first measure of success." With that, Bai Hao stopped talking and looked over at Bai Xiaochun. Bai Xiaochun blinked a few times as he considered the matter. Pretending to bow his head to one of the two newcomers was something he could accept. However, even as he pondered Bai Hao's words, his own thoughts brought him back to a situation which had occurred when he first got to the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect. Bai Hao could tell that his master suddenly seemed a bit distracted. Feeling a bit hesitant, he continued with his second plan. "There's another plan I came up with," he explained. "This one is a bit more direct, and also a bit more high profile. It will probably lead to more situations that have to be dealt with. You could participate in a competition with Sun Yifan and Sima Dao regarding necromancy and spirit enhancement, and then crush them. It could lead to other problems. However, if we manage to get them to challenge you, Master, then as the accused party, you could strike back with impunity." Afterward, Bai Xiaochun remained silent and thoughtful for a bit. Then his eyes glittered, and he suddenly looked very excited. "Ha ha ha, well done, apprentice. Those two plans are excellent. However, I actually have a better way to deal with the situation." Bai Hao's eyes widened. "Master," his heart began to pound when he thought about how Bai Xiaochun had handled matters in the past. For some reason, he was already getting a bad feeling about the situation. "Fear not, my apprentice, Master has a lot of experience handling situations like this. Just watch and learn." With that, Bai Xiaochun rose to his feet, looking very excited and confident. To him, the sky already looked bluer than it had before. The truth was that if Bai Xiaochun hadn't mentioned having experience, then Bai Hao would actually have felt a lot better. But now, he got a very sinking feeling about what was to come. At that point, Bai Xiaochun produced a transmission jade slip from his bag of holding. "HMMMPHH. I don't care if this is business warfare, do you really think I'm afraid of you?" Back in the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect, Lord Bai was unparalleled under heaven. "When it comes to fighting wars without landing blows, nobody can beat me." Feeling quite proud, he quickly sent a message to Zhou Yixing back in Giant Ghost City. The task he had in mind for him was something that Zhou Yixing would easily be able to handle. Furthermore, considering that Zhou Yixing still had the restrictive spell in him, his life and death could be controlled by a single thought from Bai Xiaochun. He hadn't contacted Zhou Yixing since coming to Arch-Emperor City, the reason being the death of Li Feng. Obviously, Bai Xiaochun had heard of the incident which had occurred during the battle with the savage tribe. He had immediately begun to suspect the significance of the event, and had eventually come to realize what it meant about Zhou Yixing. It had put Bai Xiaochun on guard, and he had decided to leave Zhou Yixing to his own designs for a short time before deciding what to do with him. Zhou Yixing was currently in a mansion he owned in Giant Ghost City, looking very gloomy. Things had gone well for him after Bai Xiaochun's departure, and everyone had treated him respectfully. But as time went on, relations with the powerful groups in the city had cooled, and were not like they had been in the past. Not all of them were distancing themselves, and Zhou Yixing still had his ways to assert his power. However, he was feeling very conflicted about being left behind in Giant Ghost City. He wanted to be with Bai Xiaochun in Arch-Emperor City, and yet, Bai Xiaochun had apparently gotten too busy to think about him. Could it be that I really made the wrong choice? That was a question he asked himself more and more often nowadays. However, there was nothing he could do but stick to his guns and wait to see what happened. If enough time passed and Bai Xiaochun didn't contact him, then he could always take the initiative to send a message. Even as he sat pondering these issues, the transmission jade slip in his bag of holding suddenly vibrated. After pulling it out anxiously, a stream of divine sense entered his mind, and he heard Bai Xiaochun's voice. Zhou Yixing, come to Arch-Emperor City. Heart bursting with excitement, he didn't delay for even a moment. After making all the necessary arrangements, he headed toward the teleportation portal. Before long, he was in Arch-Emperor City. It was his first time in the place, and he was immediately awed by its grandeur. It took a long moment for him to calm down and then find the inn that Bai Xiaochun had instructed him to stay at. That evening, Bai Xiaochun slipped into the inn unnoticed and found Zhou Yixing. "My lord," Zhou Yixing said, shooting to his feet, clasping hands, and bowing deeply. Although he was very excited, he kept it out of his voice and facial expression. Instead, he put a serious expression onto his face that said he would climb mountains of daggers and swim through seas of flames if Bai Xiaochun asked him to. Bai Xiaochun handed a bag of holding to Zhou Yixing and then lowered his voice and said, "Take these vengeful souls and other resources. Go to the shops run by Sima Dao and Sun Yifan and buy as many of the high-grade soul medicines they have that are marked with their seals." Zhou Yixing immediately bowed his head in agreement, a very serious expression on his face. Although he had just arrived in Arch-Emperor City, he had been receiving some reports about Bai Xiaochun's activities, and was generally aware of the situation. As such, he immediately understood what Bai Xiaochun was talking about. "Don't worry, my lord," he said with decisiveness that could sever nails and chop iron. "I'll handle it all immediately." A smile appeared on Bai Xiaochun's face. He offered a few more words of encouragement, and then gave the formula for 13-colored flame to Zhou Yixing, along with some advice on how to use it. Bai Xiaochun had done similar things back in Giant Ghost City, the result being that Zhou Yixing was already a terrestrial necromancer skilled with 12-colored flame. Combined with the special advice Bai Xiaochun had given, this formula was essentially the most precious of treasures to Zhou Yixing, whose heart swelled with gratitude. Although the advice from Bai Xiaochun couldn't match up to personal experience, it would at least make things easier. More important was that it indicated to Zhou Yixing how Bai Xiaochun felt about him. Furthermore, Bai Xiaochun also promised him that as soon as he mastered 13-colored flame, he would give him the formula for 14-colored flame, along with some personal advice. At that point, Zhou Yixing felt more certain than ever that he had made the right decision. After making the arrangements with Zhou Yixing, Bai Xiaochun stopped worrying about the two new shops. Instead, he hurried back to his own shop, exhilarated and in very high spirits. "After this, those two old fogies won't be underestimating me. The more experience you have in life, the sharper you get. Take me for example. After everything that happened between me and that whatchamacallit society back in the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect, how could I not think of using this method? HMMMPHH. It's simple, but effective. I'll just do the same thing." Bai Xiaochun had never forgotten what the malevolent Celestial Sky Society did with his ultra-fasting aid pill. The way they took that special pill which he had used to replace spirit food, and completely ruined it, had caused him to slip into a deep depression. Since these two necromancers have come looking to cause problems for me, then they can't blame me for being vicious and merciless in return. With that, he settled down cross-legged to meditate. As he did, the light spilling in through the door cast him in stark shadow, making him look completely ambitious and ruthless. The next day, Zhou Yixing went to work with the vengeful souls Bai Xiaochun had given him. Of course, he didn't do it himself. He hired people to go to the shops operated by Sima Dao and Sun Yifan, disguised as ordinary patrons, to purchase plenty of high-grade soul medicine. High-grade soul medicine was expensive stuff, but Bai Xiaochun was clearly determined to come out on top. For the following several days, Zhou Yixing did the same thing, using different agents every time. Eventually, half a month went by, and he had quite a large collection of high-grade soul medicine. Each and every portion was marked with the seal of either Sima Dao or Sun Yifan. Just having those marks on the soul medicine made it more expensive than before. There were also some portions of mid-grade soul medicine that were marked with the Grandmaster's seals. Zhou Yixing bought all of them. A few more days went by, and finally, he ran out of the vengeful souls that Bai Xiaochun had given him. At that point, he made contact with Bai Xiaochun. Late in the night, they met again in the same inn. Without even a moment of hesitation, Bai Xiaochun gave Zhou Yixing enough vengeful souls to buy an entire second collection of soul medicine, and then took the first collection away. The next day, Zhou Yixing went to work again. Meanwhile, Bai Xiaochun was back in his shop, hustling about as he prepared to get to work. Off to the side, Bai Hao watched, and soon had a fairly good idea of what exactly the plan was. Obviously, Master is buying up the competition's soul medicine, and then tampering with it. Afterward, he'll secretly distribute it, and when people start having problems, they'll blame Sima Dao and Sun Yifan. It's a simple plan, and matchlessly vicious. However, that soul medicine was well made, and won't be easy to tamper with. If people pick up on any of the clues, we could be shooting ourselves in the foot. After a bit of hesitation, Bai Hao voiced his concerns to Bai Xiaochun. Don't worry, my apprentice. Master knows what to do. This will work perfectly. Sticking his chin up proudly, he went into the back room and pulled out all of the soul medicine Zhou Yixing had purchased. After examining it closely, he had to admit that these two necromancers deserved their reputation. The medicine all abounded with soul power. Well, I don't have any other options. You were the ones who provoked me. Bai Xiaochun took a deep breath, and a strange glint appeared in his eyes. He had reached a critical stage in the operation. He knew that if he tampered with the medicine and people realized it, then it would be exactly as Bai Hao had reasoned. However, Bai Xiaochun was confident, and it all went back to what had occurred back when he first arrived in the wildlands and worked with soul medicine. Back then, he had tried to treat soul medicine like medicinal pills, and combine wildlands necromancy and the apothecary techniques from the Heavenspan River region to create a shocking type of soul pill. However, despite racking his brains and performing all sorts of tests, he realized that his idea was nothing more than wishful thinking. It was fundamentally impossible to combine the two different branches of study. However, he hadn't come off completely empty-handed. He had discovered a way to insert toxic elements into soul medicine in a way that was completely undetectable. After all, because the two branches of study were completely different, it would be impossible for anybody unfamiliar with the apothecary arts to detect the foreign substance. 1. The only person who might notice would be someone who was both a Grandmaster Necromancer and a Grandmaster Apothecary. In the wildlands, necromancers were numerous, but apothecaries were essentially non-existent. The reason for that was that the plants and vegetation in the wildlands were not suitable for use in medicines. It was for a similar reason that spirit-enhanced magical devices were much more rare in the Heavenspan River region. I never thought that my previous failure would actually turn out to be a powerful tool. Eyes flickering thoughtfully, he further pondered the idea of imbuing the soul medicine with toxic gas, and at the same time, doing so in a way that would not be lethal. After all, Bai Xiaochun was not the type who would rise to success by trampling upon mountains of innocent corpses. Aphrodisiac pill? No, that pill is too cruel. Fantasy pill? No, that won't work either. It got too famous. If the same effects show up here, people might think of my true identity. Besides, if the situation blew up, it would be difficult to get under control. After deliberating for a bit more time, his eyes began to shine. That green smoke from the bloodstream sect that gave people diarrhea would be perfect. Besides, if the situation blows up, there would be plenty of ways to get it back under control. Pursing his lips to suppress his laughter, he thought back to the green smoke which had resulted when he tried to concoct the Misty Spirit incense on Middle Peak in the bloodstream sect. Misty Spirit incense, a tier 4 spirit medicine. I could concoct something like that with my eyes closed. He immediately began to rifle through his bag of holding. Although he didn't have very many types of plants and vegetation, as a Grandmaster Apothecary, he had plenty of ways to alter medicine formulas. As a result, it wouldn't be difficult for him to get the result he wanted. 2. After a bit more thought, he used the powers of his mask to shield himself from the outside, then pulled out a pill furnace and set it down in front of him. It's been a long time since I did any pill concocting. After taking a moment to settle his chi and clear his mind, he set to work concocting some pills, and then began to take the green toxic gas that resulted and imbue it into the soul medicine. The night passed uneventfully, and when he walked out of the room the following morning at dawn, Bai Hao could see that, despite his exhaustion, he was very excited. In fact, he was even laughing loudly. You want to fight me, Zhou Hong? There's nothing that Lord Bai hasn't experienced in life. Thankfully, he had plenty of restrictive spells set up, ensuring that his voice didn't go outside of the shop. Worried about the situation, Bai Hao hurried over and was about to say something when Bai Xiaochun held out a portion of soul medicine. Here, my apprentice, he said proudly. Use every trick you know to study this portion of soul medicine and see if there's anything wrong with it. A serious look appeared in Bai Hao's eyes as he looked at the high-grade soul medicine. However, after studying it for a long moment, he couldn't see anything out of the ordinary. He even performed an incantation gesture and waved his finger, studying the soul medicine in every way he could think of. In the end, he had to admit that it looked like nothing more than an ordinary portion of soul medicine. Look up quizzically at Bai Xiaochun, he said. Master, did you really tamper with this soul medicine? Or did you take out the wrong one? Bai Hao was both a ghost cultivator who existed as a soul body, and also a genius when it came to flame conjuring. If he couldn't identify something unusual about the soul medicine, then it would be hard to find someone else in the wildlands who could. At first, Bai Xiaochun was worried that he had pulled out the wrong soul medicine, but after looking it over, he laughed heartily and said, "That's the right one. Within 1 month, those 2 shops' names will be ruined." When he thought back to his own miserable defeat at the hands of the Celestial Sky Society way back when, he knew that he was pulling a vicious and dirty trick. However, his opponents had really forced him into a corner. When I make a move, I frighten even myself. Rushing out of the shop, he contacted Zhou Yixing to set up another meeting. After handing over all of the tampered soul medicine, he gave some warnings and instructions that Zhou Yixing accepted without question. Afterward, Bai Xiaochun left in a wonderful mood. Zhou Yixing was definitely a skilled follower. He had only been in Arch-Emperor City for a short time, but had plenty of men and resources at his disposal back in Giant Ghost City. Therefore, it was relatively easy for him to make certain connections in his new home. Almost immediately, he began to arrange for dealers to distribute the soul medicine. This soul medicine was high grade, and had the marks of grandmasters on them. Furthermore, no amount of inspection would reveal any flaw in them. Considering that they were being offered at a discounted price, it made them easy to sell. In fact, were it not for the fact that Bai Xiaochun had expressly forbidden it, it would have been possible to sell the entire batch of soul medicine in one go. It only took about a day to get the high-grade soul medicine distributed within Arch-Emperor City. Not too long after that, the second batch that Zhou Yixing had purchased was finished, and also began to filter out into the city. More and more soul cultivators were getting their hands on it. Of course, Zhou Yixing made sure that most of it went to soul cultivators from Burrow 89 and the surrounding boroughs. Before long, a third batch was being sold, then a fourth and a fifth. During the half-month that passed, more and more cultivators acquired such medicine. And then, gradually, very strange things began to happen. The first incident occurred at Little Wolf God's house. Little Wolf God himself sat stock still and completely expressionless on a balcony, watching 2 soul cultivators dueling in the courtyard below. Whoever prevailed in the duel would win Little Wolf God's favor, and would be able to join him as a follower. To Little Wolf God, it wasn't a very important matter, but to the 2 cultivators involved in the duel, it was quite the opposite. That was especially true of the weaker of the 2 opponents, who was a middle-aged man named Zhou Chenwu. In fact, the duel was so important to him that he had bought a portion of high-grade soul medicine and consumed it right before the fighting started. That had pushed him to much higher levels of power. The duel had been going on for some time when, all of a sudden, that Zhou Chenwu's face suddenly flickered. Then he fell back, a look of complete incredulity on his face. He looked like he was about to say something, but before he could, his opponent moved in for the kill. "Hold on, Li Linzhen, His opponent completely ignored him, unleashing a magical technique before Zhou Chenwu could even finish speaking. Zhou Chenwu anxiously dodged to the side, but that motion apparently put pressure on his abdomen, and as he moved away, a shocking furt sound echoed out. In addition to the amazingly loud sound, Zhou Chenwu's pants suddenly expanded outward as if they were being filled with air or gas. Moments later, the most noxious of odors imaginable began to spread out in the area. Zhou Chenwu's opponent Li Linzhen was nearest, and was immediately blasted by the odor. Li Linzhen had a core formation cultivation base, and would generally not be affected by toxic gases. However, this odor was so strong that his face fell, and he immediately felt sick to his stomach. Everyone watching the duel was stunned, and Little Wolf God, who had closed his eyes moments before, suddenly opened them and looked over in shock. What was that sound? This can't be right. Cultivators of our level don't eat food. Unless, maybe Zhou Chenwu is using some kind of special divine ability? Most of the audience was simply looking on in wide-eyed shock. As for Li Linzhen, he had to suppress the urge to vomit as he angrily said, "What are you doing, Zhou Chenwu?" Face scarlet, Zhou Chenwu replied, "Let's end things for today, fellow Taoist Li. We can reschedule the duel for another day." Inside, he was nearly going crazy. Completely unsure of what was happening, he turned to leave, howling miserably in his heart. He could feel his abdomen churning, and could even hear loud gurgling noises coming from the same area, noises that were completely embarrassing. What's going on? What's happening? Even as Zhou Chenwu turned to leave, Li Linzhen in his humiliation let out a shout and prepared to attack again. At this point, Zhou Chenwu's back was to him. Stay away, Zhou Chenwu shouted urgently. I can't hold it in, but he was too late. Li Linzhen closed in and hit him on the back. At that point, Zhou Chenwu truly couldn't hold on any longer, and a thunderous fart rang out, followed by a burst of some gaseous substance. Before Li Linzhen could do anything, the gas blasted into him. The noxious nature of the odor was even more intense than the last time, and Li Linzhen was even closer. A scream erupted from his mouth, and he tumbled backward miserably. You're pushing things too far, Zhou Chenwu. Face burning red, Zhou Chenwu fled. As he went along, the fart sounds continued to echo out, and left behind clouds of gas the entire way. It was only after he was gone that the soul cultivators back in Little Wolf God's home finally got around to reacting. When the noxious gas reached them, they immediately devolved into a hubbub. Was that a fart? Zhou Chenwu must have done it on purpose. Chaos ensued, and Little Wolf God was immediately enraged. And that was only the first incident. After the time it takes an incense stick to burn, there was a second incident somewhere else in Arch-Emperor City. Then a third, and a fourth. The fourth incident was particularly shocking. In one bustling market in Borough 87, a beautiful female cultivator was surrounded by a cluster of male cultivators. The entire group was chatting merrily when, without any warning, the woman's face fell, and a loud phhhrt sound escaped into the open. The male cultivators all gaped in shock, and some blurted, "What was that sound?" Then, an indescribably noxious odor caused all of their faces to flicker. As for the female cultivator, she simply couldn't stop more thunderous fart sounds from exploding out. It sounded like a booming drum originating directly from the female cultivator. Eyes went wide, and numerous jaws dropped. As for the female cultivator, she began to scream, and tried to prevent what was happening, but was completely incapable. Fart, fart, fart. Clouds of foul, noxious gas spread out in all directions into the crowded marketplace, causing numerous shouts of alarm to rise into the air. Panic ensued as people scrambled to escape. Such scenes played out not only in Borough 87, but also in Borough 88, Borough 86 and Borough 85. And even more incidents occurred in Borough 89. Chaos spread as the fart sounds and the foul gas began to fill the city. Anyone who encountered that odor felt as if they were being infected. Before long, clouds of gas covered large areas of the city. And yet, the most unimaginable aspect of the disaster was yet to come. Soon, the soul cultivators with the upset stomachs found that after expelling the gas, they started having diarrhea. The lucky ones were struck by the diarrhea when they were alone. Unfortunately, many were out in the open. Soon, agonized shrieks of madness began to fill all of the areas near Borough 89. What exactly is going on here? This isn't a sneak attack, is it? It doesn't seem like it is. Who did this? Who's behind it? I'm gonna kill him. Miserable screams and roars of rage filled Arch-Emperor City. Bai Xiaochun soon heard about what was happening, and even saw a soul cultivator outside of his shop unleashing an overwhelming stench onto the street. As the foul gas spread out, people scrambled to avoid it. Bai Xiaochun's eyes went wide, and Bai Hao looked completely taken aback. Something's wrong, Bai Xiaochun muttered. That smoke I added was supposed to cause diarrhea. Why is everyone farting? Nervous, he backed away from the gas, worried he might be infected. Then, his eyes went wide as he saw a second soul cultivator emitting fart sounds. Before long, a third could be seen, and then a fourth. In the time it takes an incense stick to burn, 8 people on the street near his shop were all struck, and were sending foul gas out in all directions. Cries of alarm rang out as the passers-by fell into pandemonium. His next-door neighbors Sima Dao and Sun Yifan also looked on in shock, and quickly ascertained that the gas would be impossible to dispel. Both necromancers were very unsettled. Suddenly feeling very nervous, Bai Hao looked out at the crazed populace, then turned to Bai Xiaochun and said, "Moss Master. I'm pretty sure all of those people had high-grade soul medicine in their hands. Could it be that?" "Keep your voice down," Bai Xiaochun interrupted. Rushing forward, he slammed the door shut. "Don't tell me that I've gotten rusty at concocting medicine? It was supposed to be diarrhea. Why is everybody farting? That odor is almost unbelievably noxious." Shaking his head gloomily, he thought back to all of the various accidents that had occurred back when he was into medicine concocting. I really didn't do it on purpose this time. Who would ever have thought that things would turn out so crazy? Heart pounding, he looked out through the door crack at the gas filling the street and the fleeing soul cultivators. Some of them weren't able to take the stench and began to pass out. When Bai Xiaochun saw that, his fear mounted. Trembling, he murmured, "That stench is so powerful. It affects everybody, regardless of their cultivation base." The cataclysmic nature of the event was thanks in large part due to how well Zhou Yixing had gone about distributing all of the soul medicine. He had hired a lot of people to help, and had sold the medicine just as Bai Xiaochun had indicated, focusing mostly on the area around Burrow 89. After all, if the effects were too scattered, they couldn't be considered a true catastrophe. Burrow 89 and the surrounding areas were very densely populated. Therefore, as the various patches of foul gas spread and combined, they slowly became something like a dark fog that gripped the entire area in its clutches. It all came as a complete shock to Zhou Yixing. However, he had followed the plan which had been set in place, dismissing all of the people he had hired, and then changing his disguise and going into hiding. However, he didn't forget the final step of the plan. Even as he lay in hiding, he gritted his teeth and pulled out a portion of high-grade soul medicine that had been tampered with, then consumed it. Before long, he also became a source of loud furt noises. Face ashen, he began to shout in a gruff voice. "Damn this high-grade soul medicine. The symptoms only appeared after I consumed this medicine. Damn it, it even had the mark of Sima Dao on it." Other soul cultivators in the area heard him. They had already been gripped by rage, but after hearing Zhou Yixing's words, they initially hesitated, but then came to the realization that they had also consumed such soul medicine. Immediately, angered shouts began to sing out. "It's the high-grade soul medicine. I consumed a portion that had the mark of Sun Yifan on it. That's when all of this started happening. It's his fault. That's right. I had some of that high-grade soul medicine too. The kind with Sima Dao's mark on it. He's in on it too." More and more such accusations began to fly, and the howls of rage and humiliation began to reach a fever pitch. At first, people began to search for the dealers who had sold them the high-grade soul medicine, but Zhou Yixing had long since ensured that they couldn't be found. Naturally, the attention of the victims quickly became focused on Sima Dao and Sun Yifan. "Let's find Sima Dao. He's the one that concocted this soul medicine, and it was obviously defective. He's trying to get famous at the expense of the common people. Don't forget Sun Yifan. It was his soul medicine that I ate. He's a grandmaster. How dare he try to run a scam on us? Find them." It didn't take long before a huge mob was pouring through the streets of Burrow 89. Soon, they were on the very street where Bai Xiaochun's shop was located, a river of countless soul cultivators, only a small portion of which were people who had actually consumed the soul medicine. The rest had only been affected secondhand. Righteous indignation burned within the crowd as they rushed toward the shops owned by Sima Dao and Sun Yifan. Burrow 89 was in complete chaos. As for Bai Xiaochun, he was the one truly responsible for all of this, and the sight of what was happening had him trembling in fear. Furthermore, he knew that it would not be easy to sat the anger of this crowd. After all, he had personally experienced many situations just like this in which the crowd had been after him. "You people forced me to do this," he muttered nervously. "I really had no choice." As he crouched there in his shop, he would occasionally open and close the door to fan the gas away. Bai Hao watched everything happening, sighing and musing that this unreliable master of his really did have a knack for making people feel helpless. In fact, Bai Hao almost couldn't believe that he was really a nascent soul expert. And yet, somehow that made Bai Xiaochun seem more down to earth to him, instead of some lofty and unreachable person. Bai Hao smiled wryly at the realization that it actually made him feel closer to his master. As Bai Hao sighed, Bai Xiaochun nervously peeked outside to see how events played out. The enraged shouting seemed to be peaking. The foul gas made it difficult to see, but people were already relying on divine abilities and magical techniques to try to drive it away. As the mob grew larger, Bai Xiaochun was able to detect with his divine sense that people had burst into the two shops on either side of him. Instantly, cursing and shouting could be heard inside. "What are you people doing? What are we doing? More like what did you do? This soul medicine has your mark on it, doesn't it, Sima Dao? I'm gonna kill you, Sun Yifan. Stay your hand. Listen to me. That soul medicine doesn't have anything to do with me." Booms and crashes could be heard, and Bai Xiaochun's divine sense clearly revealed to him that the two shops on either side of him were a scene of utter chaos. People were completely trashing both shops, and both signs had already been torn down and ripped to pieces. Bai Xiaochun blinked a few times. Although things seemed to be going well, the anxiety in his heart continued to mount. Even as he started pondering how to defuse the situation, his divine sense revealed to him that certain people from the crowd were now rushing in the direction of his shop. Not good. They must know I'm responsible. That was his initial thought, but he quickly realized that it couldn't be the case. No, there's no way they could know that. A boom rang out as the door to his shop was blown to bits, whereupon a large group of soul cultivators stormed in. Standing tall and straight, he glared at the soul cultivators and shouted out in a thunderous voice, "What do you people think you're doing? I'm not Sun Yifan. And I'm not Sima Dao either. This shop belongs to me, Bai Hao. This is the #1 spirit enhancement shop under heaven." He even unleashed some of the power of his cultivation base, causing incredible pressure to weigh down in his shop. The soul cultivators froze in place, and their faces fell. They immediately began to apologize, then rushed back out. The truth was that it wasn't a case of mistakenly identifying the wrong shop. They had hoped to take advantage of the riot outside to do some looting. After all, in addition to the victims, there were also many unscrupulous individuals in the mob. Bai Xiaochun's shop wasn't the only one to be targeted, others in the area also fell victim. When Bai Xiaochun realized what was happening, his anxiety mounted. However, despite the fact that he had caused the foul gas to appear, he couldn't control it. In that moment of crisis, Bai Hao's eyes lit up, and he leaned over and whispered, "Master, I have a plan." Bai Hao quickly explained his idea. Having no time to think about it at length, Bai Xiaochun nodded and then rushed out the front door. Looking around at the countless people milling about in the foul gas, at the ruins that were the two adjacent shops, and at all the other shops in the area, from within which echoed the sounds of yelling and fighting, he unleashed the power of his cultivation base. Then he blurred into motion, appearing in front of one of the nearby shops. Backing his voice with all of the power he was capable of, he bellowed, "Stop, all of you." He even drew upon some of the energy of the undying emperor's fist to cause his voice to boom out in a way that seemed highly threatening. At the same time, he waved his hand, causing all of the rioters inside to fly out into the street. Facing the employees that remained, he said, "Come with me immediately. Let's put an end to this chaos." Of course, everyone in the affected shop was furious at how they were being unfairly dragged into such a bad situation. Having been saved from the rioters, they were profoundly grateful, and immediately joined Bai Xiaochun with the intention of helping calm the situation down. Before long, Bai Xiaochun and his group appeared in front of a second shop, where they quickly quelled the chaos. Then they moved on to a third shop. More and more soul cultivators joined him. Furthermore, he acted with utmost heroism and bravery, taking the initiative to attack the rioters. Before long, all of the shops in the area were banded together under his leadership, and were restoring order. Stay your hand. If you have an issue, explain yourself calmly. Anyone resorting to violence will be executed according to the law. This is Arch-Emperor City, don't even think of staging a revolt. Under Bai Xiaochun's leadership, the shops suppressed most of the chaos. Soon, they had about as many people on the streets as the angriest of the soul cultivators in the mob. That, coupled with the fact that Bai Xiaochun himself was so powerful, and that they also occupied the high ground in terms of the law, ensured that the rest of the soul cultivators gradually calmed down. As a result, everyone from the local shops looked to Bai Xiaochun with eyes that shone with gratitude. Although many of them had felt ill will toward him in the past, as of now, his actions in this moment of crisis led them to feel much respect toward him. Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.